Hello, nerds! Nerds for Humanity. Today we are going to cover median income, food insecurity, homelessness, coronavirus, life expectancy, labor participation rate, income growth by demographic group, polarization, and a whole bunch of other metrics to try and figure out, was Donald Trump the best, the worst, or somewhere in the middle of all of our one-term presidents who lost the popular vote twice? But before we get into that, let's just ask Andrew to warm us up. Andrew, warm it up, Chris.
There's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the gang gang. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the gang gang.
Oh my goodness. Merry Christmas Eve to everybody. I've got to go soon to pick up a bird for my youngest son. He's very excited about getting a parakeet for Christmas. But before I did that, I thought I'd share some data. You know, like, it's been too long since we've done a data deep dive, and I know a lot of the Nerds members appreciate that, so I want to make sure I cover it. Before I get started, where is everybody joining us from? As you guys know, or many of you know, I am coming to you from San Francisco Bay Peninsula, just south of Nancy Pelosi's district, who is doing a nice little poker game with Trump and McConnell. But oh, Fred the Felon's in the house. Birds are awesome. Yeah, man. We were originally thinking of getting finches, but he's decided that he wants to try and tame and train a parakeet. So, but I have a weakness for finches. Oh, Pennsylvania in the house. Cal Poly, Pomona, Nebraska. Love it. All right. Illinois. Arizona in a remote cabin. Oh, man. You know, I made some dinner last night. And I have to say, I did a pretty good job. Let me show you a picture of what I fired up on the old Weber. I'm not talking about Weber gas. None of that. I'm talking about just on coals, man. Bam. How you like them apples? I actually had apple pie after this. But that is a dry-aged, medium rare, nicely charred ribeye steak. So Mrs. Nerd is making dinner tonight, but I was like, hey, I want to make some steak at some point during these holidays. So she was like, fine, you can make it for Christmas Eve. So there you go. All right. You guys ready to look? Oh, Oakland. What's up? Home of Marshawn Lynch. All right. So, oh, Reno, Nevada, Tejas. Love it. We need some logic in Tejas. Well, we're going to bring some data. I don't know if I can bring it to all of Tejas, but we will for the Nerds for Humanity Nation. Okay. Let's start into the data and see what we find. Hold on one second. I gotta adjust some settings here on my audio because I'm getting some weird feedback. No worries. No worries at all. Okay. Well, make that work. Okie dokie. Let us look at the real median household income. Interesting. There it is. So this is from the Federal Reserve Bank. This is not from Breitbart or, MSNBC or anything. And this basically looks at real median income over time. And what's interesting is since, it's 2014, real median income has been, has been growing quite nicely, even when you adjust it for inflation. Certainly, there was a little bit of flattening from 2017 and 18, but then a nice boost to 2019. Obviously, who knows what 2020 is going to look like? We don't have the annual data for that yet. But, I think the narrative here is that it's easy to say, oh, Obama was terrible. Like Obama took office in 2008 as, or actually was sworn in. I guess he was sworn in 2009. So he certainly had the financial crisis and the mortgage, all the banks kind of falling apart and people getting evicted and then car companies starting to go bankrupt. But you can see we kind of hit bottom in 2012 and then started recovering pretty nicely all the way till 16 and then continued that. And then had a nice spike from 18 to 19. So you got to give credit to both Obama and Trump. They both did a good job. And if you want it to be really, depending on how you look at it, like who had a tougher job? Obama inheriting the George W. Bush wars and financial crisis, or Trump inheriting, 2 years of strong economic growth in median income from Obama? I don't know. Some people could argue, well, it's harder to increase the slope of a line over time, which is a fair argument. But I think it's helpful to just kind of be dispassionate about like, oh, orange man bad, Obama man bad. From a median income point of view, they both did a pretty good job. Like if you didn't tell me that it was the orange man on the bottom, on the right-hand side of the chart, I'd say, oh, whoever was in office must have done a pretty good job. So that's median income for you. Hope that shares a little bit. Next, we're going to look at something that's a little bit less encouraging, which is food insecurity. And that one, well, I'll let you guys decide. Let's share the Chrome tab. Where in the Sam Hill? Is it this one? Maybe. Yep, there we go. Food insecurity and very low food insecurity in the U.S. from 1995 until 2019. Wow, this candle is intense. Okay. And let's show the x-axis here. So as you can see, food insecurity was fairly flat from 95 until 2005. Then it jumped during the financial crisis, where, certainly people were talking about the risk of a depression. And it came down from 2011 to 2013 to 2015, 16. So it has come down quite a bit at a nice rate, really. So I think this is one of those examples where, whether you want to talk about Obama or Trump, like there was some traction there. Now, should the richest country in the world have still 10% of its population food insecure? Yeah, probably not. Probably we could do more there. But I think this is where President Trump, during his reelection campaign, was trying to make the argument that, people are economically better off pre-pandemic than when he took office. I think that's probably true. At least from now, we've got the median income and food insecurity up until 2019. Now, obviously, 2020 was a very, very different story, and historians will argue over whether Trump did a good or bad job in 2020. But certainly from the economic data and the food insecurity data up until 2019, so for the first 3 years of the Trump administration, that data looks encouraging. All right, let's move on now to the next chart. How you guys holding up there? Are you you gotta strap in, because there's gonna be more charts coming. Hopefully this isn't too much for you all, but if it is, that's fine. You can drop off anytime, and we'll catch up with you later. Okay. Let's see. Let's look at the state of homelessness. And you can see from 2008 to 2018. Let's fire up the chart. Okay, homelessness peaks around 2012, flattens, starts coming down 2014 to 2015, then comes down again 2015 to 2016, and then continues to decline at roughly the same rate in 17 and 18. Again, we don't have the data for 2020 yet, and I'm sure 2020 data is not going to look great, but I think you could definitely make the case that when it comes to homelessness, that President Trump and Obama did a pretty good job, and that Trump continued that Obama recovery. Now, what is different is that excuse me, you'll often hear about the Trump people talking about how Obama was so terrible, but if you look at this chart and you factor in the economic crisis that he didn't cause, you could argue like, well, Obama, Trump, they pretty much did the same thing for homelessness. So that is the homelessness number. Now, we will touch on some 2020 data, which is coronavirus. So you can't really talk about the Trump presidency without talking about the pandemic. And here's an interesting chart around hospitalizations for COVID. And you can see here, Italy, France, UK. Now, you could argue, hey, those are pretty small countries. But let's see if we can add Germany. Is Germany in here? Oh, come on. No, I don't have access to German data. Ooh. Well, UK's in here. That's a pretty good country. Yeah. Spain. Let's add Spain. It's a pretty big country. Okay. So as you can see here, oh, can I add Japan? Let's see. Oh, boo. All right. Well, here is the number of COVID patients in hospital. It's not fair to say that the US line is bigger than the Canadian line, let's say. There are 100,000 Americans hospitalized on December 18th, and there were 3,000 hospitalized in Canada. And the Canadian population is 38 million, and the US population is 330 million. So we're about, let's see, 330. We're about 8 times more people than the Canadians. But you could argue like we have more than 8 times the people in hospital for COVID than the Canadians. It looks like we have about almost 35, around 35 times more people in hospital, but only 8 times more population. So I think this is where you really have to say President Trump kind of did a pretty terrible job. There's no other way to describe it. You should not have 30 times more people getting hospitalized than the Canadians. Now you could argue like, oh, you can't compare it to Japan, you can't compare it to Korea. Well, they're in different continents. Canada is not in a different continent. They share a border with us, and somehow they've managed to tamp it down better than us. And I know a lot of Trump supporters will say, oh, the heat will kill the virus, but Canada is not known for a very warm climate. So when it comes to coronavirus, I would say, at least if you look at hospitalization, I see some people are asking for the source of the data. I'll put that in a chart in the chat, which is ourworldindata.org. I think they pull most of it from WHO and Johns Hopkins. So that is the hospitalization. Let's see if I have any other interesting number in hospital. Yeah, well, this is Europe, say world. Here you can actually see what it looks like over time. So let's play back the data. If you go back to February 2020, there were not, in fairness to President Trump, there were not a lot of people who were, in hospital. But then as history unfolded, you can start seeing it in Europe, really, then US. And then US gets really bad in terms of hospitalizations. You see Canada is right on our border, and they're getting worse, but not quite as much as us. In fact, they actually had some points of getting better. Whereas the US continues to be in that dark red, more than 25,000 people in the hospital kind of over time. But, in fairness to Trump, it's not like it's just a US pandemic. It is definitely a global pandemic. Here is when I didn't have to do the math on the side. They actually did it for me. Sorry. So here, as you can see, when you adjust for population size, you see that Italy and France are doing worse than the US in hospitalizations. But Canada, you can see, is way down here. UK, Australia, Belgium are doing better. And let's see who else we can add. I bet Spain is probably not doing that good. Let's add them. Denmark, Ireland, Netherlands, Iceland. Okay, so let's see how those guys are doing. Yeah. So you see here, when you adjust by population size, you definitely want to be in this Denmark, Canada, Netherlands, Finland, Ireland camp. You really don't want to be in this France, US, Italy, Czechia camp. And then the middling group is not really that much better. But certainly, like, even the Spanish have managed to kind of bring down their hospitalization rate. And the US seems to be going up. See the US trend going up, the Spaniards going down. What about the Italians have brought it down? The French have come down. Belgium has done a pretty good job bringing it down. But again, here's the US chart. So, I think this is an example where if you have a global pandemic and, oh, son of a gun, I was not sharing. Gosh darn it, guys. I'm sorry. Here, hold on. Let me go back and share. Thank you for your patience. Here we go. Here's hospitals per million. So like I was saying, number of COVID hospital patient in hospital per million. So adjusts for population size. So you don't have this issue of like, oh, well, the US has more people. Of course, they're going to have more cases. So now it's per million population. And as you can see from the shape of these lines, the US is not the worst. We're doing better than France and Italy, but doing much worse than this group down here: Denmark, Canada, Netherlands, Iceland, Finland, Ireland. I think what's more interesting is the slope and the trend of these lines. So here's the US line. All right, you see here that we are actually going up in terms of we're getting more people hospitalized every day pretty much since October. It's been bad. It went down a little bit in the summer, and now it's really been growing. And you say, well, we're doing better than those French, but look at the French line. You see the French line is actually coming down. Or you say, look at the Italian line. The Italian line's going down. This is the American line. So I would not be surprised if part of this is due to just the let's be generous and call it the uneven implementation of mitigation strategies between all of different states. It's basically every state for themselves, and some states have decided to do very little, and others have decided to do more. And we really just don't have a national mitigation plan. I think if you follow the president, the real emphasis is on the vaccinations. And it is absolutely true that Operation Warp Speed is truly a marvel. So hats off to Pfizer and Moderna and all the scientists that have worked on that, and to the Trump administration for providing funding and accelerated reviews. But the cold hard facts of this are, this line here is not going to go down anytime soon. And the reason is, while the president talks about, vaccines are shipping today and more vaccines are shipping every day. Well, the reality is that most of us are not going to have any access to the vaccine for several months, right? And between now and call it March, we're probably going to hit maybe 500,000 person that died of COVID in America. So what you really wish was that there were emphasis on two things. And I know this is asking a lot, but two things simultaneously to accelerate the development and distribution of vaccines and availability of vaccinations, and concurrently mitigate the spread through mandatory quarantine for international travelers, mandatory quarantine for travel between states, mandatory masks, and social distancing. But unfortunately, the current administration has been really all about Operation Warp Speed. So it's like, well, yeah, if my house is burning down, I'm glad that you developed automatic sprinklers, but we still kind of need to keep this house from completely burning down while you're installing these sprinklers. And those sprinklers are only like in one room of the house, and it's like a 10-room house. So that's the COVID data for you. Let us proceed next with life expectancy. All right. So is Trump doing a good job? Did Obama do a good job? Are we screwed? Let's see, life expectancy. So this looks at the trends from 1950, and then it projects out to 2021. And you can see life expectancy from birth, and then the green is the annual change in that life expectancy. And what you can see is that we had some nice improvement throughout the 70s. Unfortunately, the improvement in life expectancy did not went down a little bit. Like it still improved, but didn't improve by much, like by 0.1% in the 80s. And then the 90s were pretty much kind of like very, very minimal improvement. But they were still improving. And then for the first time, 2014, 16, 17, and 18, they technically went down and then went back up in 19. And then obviously we don't know what 2020 is going to look like. That's a projection. But you have to say that this is probably the opioid crisis. And, you know, if you want to hold Trump accountable for the pandemic, you kind of have to hold Obama accountable for the opioid crisis, because that did happen under his watch. Now, has Trump done much to address the opioid crisis? Maybe not, but it is what it is, right? So from a life expectancy point of view, the macro trend is that we've actually done pretty well as a country, you know, growing from a life expectancy in the 50s of only 68 years to now pushing close to 80. It has come down a little bit. I guess I had a high of 78.94, and now we're at, we're still at an all-time high, 78.99. It's pretty much flat, and probably will, I would imagine, might come down for 2020 based on the pandemic. But we'll see. We'll see. And there's not just the pandemic effect, but there's also because hospitals are overrun with people catching COVID and having to be hospitalized, they are for sure deferring procedures that might extend life for other people. So that's life expectancy. TLDR is, you know, it's not like we're going to hell in a handbasket. It's just, it hasn't improved as much. So this is one of those things where, you know, you could allow your partisan biases to kind of convince you that, you know, Obama was terrible and Trump is amazing, or Obama was amazing and Trump was terrible. And yeah, the reality is that the data takes a little bit longer to kind of show any impact, and there is limited effect from one presidential administration to another. So that's life expectancy. Okay, now let's look at labor participation rate. All right, here we go. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And let me share. So this is the percent of people who are in the workforce. So they have to actually be looking for work versus saying, hey, I'm just not going to pursue a job in a traditional sense, at least. And as you can see here, it's really been on a decline since 2000. It was around 67% in 2000s. And now it's really around 61, just under 62. And it had a really big drop, basically due to the pandemic in the early part of 2020. You know, how should we interpret this? Like, I guess you could say there's good news here. Maybe you could argue people don't feel like they have to work. I think more likely, another interpretation is people feel like there aren't as many attractive job opportunities for them. And you had a very big decline from 2006 all the way to basically 2015. And then it flattened out from 2015 to 16, and then had a little bit of a jump at the end of 19, and then really took a dump in 2020. How would I evaluate Trump on labor participation? I'm not going to blame him for a global pandemic. Probably I would blame him for not doing enough mitigation, which then resulted in more drastic shutdowns in some states. But I'm kind of Monday morning quarterbacking a little bit. In hindsight, probably would have been better to acknowledge the virus early, to not only talk about banning flights from China, but we should have talked about mandatory quarantine for all international travelers, something that now most developed countries do, but is still in the US, we don't have mandatory quarantine or mandatory testing for people flying in from like the United Kingdom or Spain or Italy or wherever. And that probably affected, the economy. But from a labor participation rate point of view, pre-COVID, slight improvement under Trump. So there's that. All right. I've got more charts on income inequality, polarization, and climate, as well as some other stuff. But I'm going to go quickly grab a cup of tea or water and then come right back. So let me see if I can find something for you guys to watch in the meantime. Let me see if I have any good videos. Whoa, some weird stuff on Twitter. You know what? I'm just going to throw up a chart and then we'll talk about it. But let's see here. We'll share this screen that looks at income inequality. And here, the number of people in poverty and poverty rate. So take a look at that. I'm going to be right back in about 30 seconds, but feel free to talk about it in the chat. Be right back. Oh. All right, nerds. Hello, nerds. I am back. Okay. So let's look here at the poverty rate and the number of people in poverty. And as you can see, we definitely hit a peak around 2000, maybe, so let's see, that's 10, 11, 12, like 12, 13. And then the number in poverty has come down 2014, 2015, 2016, 17, 18. So, and it's come down to 10%. Like it used to be 22% poverty rate in the late 50s. Then it came down to 15% in the 90s, and then peaked at around 15 in the Obama years, right after the big kind of economic crisis. And it really came down quite nicely. So again, like, well, if you look at the line here, Obama, 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 and then Trump, Trump. So is there like a huge difference between the Obama line and the Trump line? Probably not, but at least it kept going down under Trump. So you have to give Trump credit for being able to continue that Obama recovery. So that is, kind of a fresh look at poverty. There's this view that, under Trump, poverty was huge because of all the tax cuts for the rich, but, not really. Now, of course, the big thing here is this ends in 2019. I don't think we know the economic impact of this pandemic on lower income people. And, again, if you did more mitigation early, you probably could have avoided these big dramatic shutdowns, but that's not the route that the president took. So, at any rate, he did liberate a lot of states, and now those states are dealing with the consequences. So let's now look at, I have some more stuff for you around polarization. But first, I do want to acknowledge people who are supporting this content through our channel membership program. So if you're on YouTube, feel free to hit that join button, and you can help support more content and help us grow this channel, because obviously we are a little channel on YouTube, but doing my best to bring more data and kind of evidence to these conversations. So first of all, thank you, Kristen Slevin, our EVP, highest level member. And then we're going to go to our next level, our vice presidents. VLAM, JM Sap, Fat Lamb, Soldier One, Laura Lane, Joshua Frick, Patrick Dunn, and Boyce from Mindful Skeptics. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then we're going to go to the next level down, which is a hardcore. And we've got Mike, Gene, David, Tracy, DK, Landline, Phoenix, Jackalego, Kirsch, Mr. History Fan, Byram, Mona, Susan, Yang, Robert, Dean, and Stat Nerd. And then at the entry level, but still very much appreciated, are our verified nerds: Helen, Lisa, Sugar, Albert, Brandon, Yes, Brian, Peter, Arez, Hitachi, Your Maman, Jedwiga, Sophia, Gail, Shake and Make, Mike, Doris, Emerald, Nell, Lori, Ben. What happened? That just skipped. Hold on. Ben, Roger, Lisa, Christina, Vaughn, Tony, Rasta, Ryan, Jessica, Blair Walsingham, Bike, James, Jalopy, Aaron, Emma, Joel, Spirited, KM, Hui, Stephen, Ira, and Shoni. So thank you all for supporting the Nerds for Humanity content. All the money goes to promoting the channel and supporting the costs of accessing data or podcast hosting fees. By the way, if you like audio podcasts, you can subscribe to us there too. Okay, so now let's look at polarization. Ooh, so interesting. In fact, this is actually a nice summary of 2020 by the Pew Research Center. So let's just get into that. 1 second. Bum, bum, bum. Here we go. Democrats nearly twice as likely as Republicans to view COVID as a major threat. So as you can see, only 40% of Republicans feel that the coronavirus is actually a threat to the health of the US population. Now, here's the thing. The CDC recently released data on the total death rate of Americans in 2020. And they're projecting that we're going to end 2020 with somewhere between 400 and 500,000 more deaths than we normally see. Now, there are some Trump supporters who are saying, oh, that's because they're dying of suicide or opioids, but we had suicide and opioids in previous years. And we know that at least 300,000 of those deaths were of people who tested positive for COVID and died of COVID. But, you know, there's a good example of how the two parties can agree that the Republicans do not feel like COVID-19 is a threat to public health. But both do feel like it's a threat to the U.S. economy. So that's one area of, kind of encouragement, is that Republicans and Democrats can agree. Interestingly enough, I think the nuance there is that if you ask, at least me as a registered Democrat, I think it's a threat to the U.S. economy because the lack of effective mitigation causes the need for more drastic lockdowns, which then hurts the economy even more. And I bet if you ask some Republicans, they would say the real cause of the harm to the economy is these mitigations, that you should let the restaurants and the bars and the nightclubs open. They're great small businesses, they're job creators. People should be able to travel as much as they want for Thanksgiving. Like, let them sit next to each other in the plane. Don't need to test them. Like, that's another perspective. It's not mine. But yeah, that's a little bit of a summary of how the parties and and sort of partisan politics has invaded a public health crisis. Even me saying public health crisis is very disturbing to a lot of Republicans who will say, hey, it's 99.9% survival rate. Stop spreading fear mongerer. If you look at the CDC data, it's actually a 98% survival rate. And that really doesn't capture the impact of people who are hospitalized and then survive. And then the long-term currently unknown long-term impact of having COVID, severe COVID. Not to mention, if you told me this plane that you're about to get on has a 98% survival rate, that 98% of the time this plane will land, and 1 out of 50 times it will crash, I would take that. And then they said, but if you wear a mask and you keep 6 feet apart, like, your survival rate goes up dramatically. Well, just wear the freaking mask. Separate. Stay home for this Christmas. But that's just me. So that's the COVID partisan stuff. Now, here are how countries are handling cross-border travel. And what's interesting is that the great irony of all ironies is that there was a time where the Republicans were really big, and President Trump was always saying, I'm strong on borders. Those radical left Democrats are for open borders. And the reality is that Canada, a lot of Europe, a lot of South America, Australia, New Zealand, they all have stricter border controls than the US. As an example, if you try to fly to Taiwan or China or South Korea or Singapore or Australia or New Zealand, you have to get tested before you're even allowed to get on the damn plane. You have to get tested after your quarantine, and the quarantine isn't suggested, it's mandatory. Like, you're not allowed to just go kind of just mix around with the general population the moment you step out of JFK or LaGuardia from London. So the problem that we have here is we have the strange combination of a president who is quote unquote strong on borders, but doesn't really enforce mandatory quarantine or testing for people traveling from highly infected areas. So yeah, but that's the president you have. You know, you go with the president you have, not the president you wish you had, at least for the next 30 days. And then after that, you get something that's at least a little bit less bad. Here's a share of young adults living with parents in the U.S. And you can see there was a point in the 60s where most adults lived on their own. And now, in terms of young adults, 18 to 29, now we're actually at 52%. So most young adults are living at home with their parents. You could argue like that ain't all that terrible. As a parent, I would be fine if my sons wanted to crash at my place for a little while, especially during difficult economic times. But you could also argue that it could have something to do with the cost of housing and the fact that probably a lot of jobs for these young adults are in areas that have high housing costs. So as an example, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area where there are a lot of really great tech jobs, but it is super expensive to live here. And so that's a problem that we as a country need to figure out. And, you know, there was this guy, Andrew Yang, who wanted to introduce a basic income, which would have allowed people to probably live in other parts of the country, and they don't need to get that kind of gold-plated tech job. They can still make it work in, you know, other parts of the country. They don't have to be in New York or San Francisco or LA. You know, they could be somewhere in the middle. So that's share of young adults living with their parents. Oh, this is interesting. British views opinion of the European Union. And you can see here, right before Brexit, it looks like there was a peak in unfavorable, 48, and then quite an ebb in favorable, 44. But now, after Brexit, you see 60% of Britons are favorable of the European Union, and only 37% are unfavorable. So that's kind of like if you think to yourself, wow, the US is so screwed up, like how did we elect this reality TV show man as our president? You should look at the British. Like they're not kicking ass in terms of their government. They basically voted to leave a organization that they now hold in very high regard. I suppose if you're the MAGA equivalent in UK, you could say, well, they have a high opinion because they finally got rid of them or left them. I mean, I suppose you could kind of come up with some intellectual gymnastics to justify that, but that's that data. Let's see here. Ooh. Yeah, this one is pretty consistent. China. I have to say, this is a hard one for me to talk about as a person whose grandparents were Chinese citizens and parents were immigrants from Hong Kong. Am I excited about the fact that pretty much everybody has an unfavorable view of China? No. But I mean, let's be honest, like the coronavirus originated in China, and I don't know what they could have done about it, but they probably probably could have been a little bit more thoughtful about ecological destruction that has resulted in mixing of humans and wild animals that have harbored these viruses for centuries, and they probably could have done more to alert the rest of the world, and probably could have shut down their outbound travel. Would the virus have gotten out anyway? Yes, but could it have gotten out slower? Probably. And you know, would have given us more time to mitigate. Now, would we have mitigated? According to this president, it wasn't necessary, but you can see here that if you're part of the Chinese government, and you're very unpopular, and understandably, it's I don't know how much of this is because of the virus, but you could see here that there's a big jump in 2020 of unfavorability. So I would have to imagine this is mainly because of the virus. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty clear trend. Okay, look at the Swedes. The Swedes were 40% unfavorable, and now they're 85%. Who are the most unfavorable? Ooh, the Japanese. Yeah. Japan and China obviously have some historical tension. Okay, next. Ooh, look at this. More voters saying it really matters who wins the presidency. So interestingly enough, I know the data we were looking at showed that, well, whether it's Trump or Obama, actually the economic results were quite similar. Here it's saying that no, basically after 2012 to 2016, 2016 was a very big year where people thought it mattered. And then 2020, even more people thought it mattered. So a record number of people. So I think I would ascribe this to the Trump effect, where interestingly enough, whether you love or you hate Trump, you now know that a president can impact a country. I will let you decide if he's made the country better or worse, but definitely the presidency has had impact. So that's interesting, and that probably explains why we did have record turnout in terms of people showing up to vote this time around. Okay, next. Trump approval is more polarized than for any other president since Eisenhower. So average approval among my own party and the other party. So you have in Eisenhower, he had 88% approval in his own party and 49% approval in the Democratic Party. But if you go to Obama, you have 81% approving in his party, but still you at least had 14% of Republicans approving of him. Trump is just setting the biggest record. Like, look at the distance between the blue and the gray here. Basically, 87% of Trump's own party thinks he's doing a very good job. And only 6% of the other half of the country thinks he's doing a good job. Whose fault is that? I suppose the Trump supporters will say, wow, this is the squad. The squad is causing people to hate Trump and the Trump derangement syndrome. Maybe. I don't know. I would say that if you're going to be deranged about Trump, Trump probably played a role in that derangement. But the numbers, for whatever reason, the numbers are we are more polarized as a country now than, frankly, we've ever been. However, let's be fair to the orange man. That growth in polarization did not start with Donald Trump. Basically, every president, with the exception of Carter looks like he actually closed the gap a little bit. Or basically, maybe for Carter, he had such little approval in his own party that it looks like it closed the gap. But if you look at the difference between the Delta, that's what they should have shown here. But we can do it in our heads because, this is Nerds for Humanity. So you have a 30-point delta between approval in the two parties for Johnson. You have a 40-point delta for Nixon. You only had a 30-point delta for Ford, 27 for Carter, 50 for Reagan, 40 for Bush, 50 for Clinton, 60 for W. Looks like 67 for Obama, and then 81 for Trump. So did Trump introduce polarization? No. Did Trump set record levels of polarization? Yes. So, it is what it is. I'll let you guys decide whose fault that is. Is it the squad or is it the orange man? Maybe both. Okay. 4 in 10 adults say someone in their household lost a job or wages because of COVID. Now, where is that hitting people the most? It looks like lower income had the biggest hit. Upper income, less so. Less educated had the most, high school or less, and some college got bigger hit than college. Biggest hit was to young people, 18 to 29. And then by race, Hispanics, although you could say like all the races kind of took it on the chin. So that's the effect of COVID. 54% of Americans know someone who is hospitalized or died from COVID-19. So you could argue like the whole, is this a hoax thing? It should no longer be a debate right now. I think we should all acknowledge that this is a real pandemic and people are going to hospitals and dying. I acknowledge that there are some Trump supporters who will say, well, they might be going to hospitals because they're being falsely reported as having COVID. And there's always some conspiracy theory. Now, in terms of people who know someone who's been hospitalized or with COVID, it's 70% of Blacks and about 50% of white and Asian and almost 2/3 of Hispanics. And then somehow Republicans know less people with COVID than Democrats. So that could have something to do with these demographic trends as well, most likely. All right. Vast majority of adults think pandemic provides lesson for humanity. What is the lesson that Americans are taking away from this? Let's see. 35% believe that it was a lesson sent by God. 37 do not believe it was sent by God. 13% do not believe in God. That's interesting. I wonder what lesson God was sending. But that's that data. Okay, so during the 2016 election, President, at that time, candidate Trump was talking about how the rest of the world is laughing at us. That we are a laughing stock for the rest of the world. So do countries have a more favorable view of the United States of America now than before? Well, let's look at today. And by the way, if you're enjoying this content, can you do me a solid? Can you like and share this video? That will help get more people to watch the video in the future. Okay, so let's look at this. The UK in 2000 had an 83% favorability view of America. And it looks like it was, maybe in the 70s or 60s in the mid 2000s, like 2015, 16. Then it went up a little, and now it's at 40%. France is at 30% have a favorable view. Germany, 1 out of 4 have a favorable view. A little less than half of Japanese have a favorable view. And Canadians, not super favorable on us right now, and neither are the Australians. So now, you could argue rightfully that trend did not start in 2016, but it, like many of these charts, hit an all-time low under the watch of the current president. So, D-Ralax says, this isn't a good selection of countries. The Hungarians and Polish and any country on the Pacific Ocean that isn't China. Well, Japan is on the Pacific Ocean, and they went from 77% to 40%. But I agree, the Hungarians and the Polish, probably they do like Trump, and they like America. But you could argue that UK, France, Germany, Japan, those are probably a little bit larger, more kind of higher standing countries than Hungary and Poland. No offense to the Hungarians or Polish, but just in terms of economic power and geographic size, UK, France, Germany, Japan, they seem relevant. But appreciate that input. Now, let's move on to 1 in 5 Trump and Biden supporters say they share the same core American values. So the view of Trump supporters among Biden voters is that we have fundamentally disagreement about core American values. And it's the view of Biden supporters among Trump voters. So Biden voters think that Trump supporters completely misaligned on core American values. And Trump voters think that Biden voters are completely misaligned on core American values. So, yeah, that's I'm not surprised by that. And of course, the question is why? Probably a lot of reasons. I won't say them all. But that's what it is. Okay. Media, opinion of the media. So news organizations, do they care about how good of a job they do? So you can see here that 60% of Democrats think that the media, news organizations care. but only 20, looks like, wow, only 28% of Republicans do. Only 16% think that news organizations are professional, want protect democracy, stand up for America, or care about who they report on. So you can see here that if you are a Republican or Democratic, Republican or kind of MAGA leader, if you beat up on the media, you're going to be very much aligned with Republican-leaning voters. And frankly, if you're a Democrat, it's not like the Democrats love the media news organizations either, but they seem to have a little bit more favorable view than the Republicans. Excuse me. All right. Small share of highly active Twitter users produce bulk of tweets from U.S. adults. Top 10% of tweeters create 92% of all tweets. I might be one of them. I don't know if I'm top 10%, but I produce a lot of tweets. By the way, follow me at Nerds for Yang on Twitter. Of the top 10% of tweeters, most are Democrats, which is maybe why the Republicans are going to Parler or something. I don't know why this is a question, but most Latino adults have not heard of the term Latinx and few use it. Half of Americans say the Bible should have a great deal or some influence on the laws of the U.S. 28% say the Bible should take precedence when it conflicts with the will of the people. Huh. 2/3 of evangelicals favor the Bible over the will of the people when there is a conflict between the two. There you go. 7 in 10 white evangelical voters say the Bible should have more influence on U.S. laws. So this is, yeah. I don't even want to get into this. This is too controversial, but let me just say, if you're going to be angry about Sharia law, then you should be consistent and say separate religion from government. But not everybody agrees with that. I appreciate that. And I certainly have nothing against the Bible personally. I just feel like government is government and church is church. And there should be a separation. All right. There's so many charts here, and I'm starting to lose my voice. So let's see if I can take a break from the Pew Research. And I'll wrap up with just some more charts on specifically the Trump presidency, since that was the title of this live stream. And again, hook a brother up with a like and a share while you're enjoying this data. Okay, so let's look here. As Trump, this is Trump's tweets and retweets per month. He's basically, in October, he tweeted 1,400 times. So looks like about 40 times. Yeah, 40 times a day, close to 50 times a day, about once every once every half hour. And yeah, well, that's it. At the beginning of the presidency, he really didn't do much, but he's definitely big on Twitter now. Not sure why that's kind of interesting. 91% turnover rate among senior White House officials. 13 cabinet members have resigned. 7 communication directors in as many years. 11 days of the mooch, who is on this channel, by the way. If you want to see my interview with Anthony Scaramucci, I just did it last week, and it's on the Nerds for Humanity channel. He has appointed more. So this is why a lot of evangelicals, I think, really like him. He has appointed more judges in one term than any president since Carter. So you look at Obama, that's a 2-term president, and he just has, he doesn't have double the appointments as Trump. So Trump has been appointing like very intensely. George H.W. is a fellow one-termer. He appointed 148. Ford only appointed 50. So he's doing his work in the judicial system. Maybe he's surprised that the judicial system didn't really give him the election, but I honor the decision by the Supreme Court to not get involved and let the people decide. Executive actions. This was a very hot topic about within the MAGA community about Obama saying, hey, he's not King Obama. He shouldn't be doing all these EOs. He should work with the Congress. That's how the Constitution wanted it. You guys remember that? Well, guess what? Donald Trump actually has more executive actions. Sorry, EAs. He has more executive actions than the guy that he said had too many executive actions. So take that for what it is. But yeah, the 4th year in office, he's been going nuts with the EAs. King Donald. Okay. This is share of the world's population, 4%. And then share of COVID cases, 23%. So the US is pound for pound hitting way above its weight class in terms of number of people getting infected with COVID. Golf. Trump has spent more than 300 days golfing, including 54 this year. It looks like about 1 out of every 3 days he was on a golf course in 2017, 18, and 19. So, 1 out of 3 days he was at a Trump property. In terms of golf coursing, it was more like 1 out of 4 days he was at a golf course. So, yeah, the guy likes to spend a lot of time on his resorts and hotels, and he likes to play golf. Now, I don't need to remind you, but this was a huge criticism of Barack Obama by Trump that Obama played too much golf. But I guess when Trump does it, it's okay. 1 out of every 4 days. Let's see. Executions. He's definitely leading the... Wow. Yeah, I mean, the charts, let's be fair. This chart is a little bit exaggerated because look at the y-axis. Like, okay, yes, in the 50s, there were 6 federal executions. There were 0 for the most part under Obama, and now there's 10 under Trump. Yeah, 10 versus 0. I'm not gonna beat up on Trump for that. Indictments. Well, Ronald Reagan, I think during the Iran-Contra kind of controversy, had 35 indictments, and then Richard Nixon for the Watergate stuff had 29 indictments. Barack Obama had 0 indictments. George W. Bush had 1. Clinton had 3. And Trump had 9 indictments. Friends and associates charged or found guilty of crimes. More than any of the past 4 presidents combined. But less than Reagan and Nixon. So if you are saying that Trump is the most corrupt person ever, he is not quite as corrupt in terms of number of indictments as Richard Nixon or Ronald Reagan. So there you go. Pardons and commutations. So you got Wow, 1,700 commutations under Obama, 212 pardons. I think Trump has issued some more recently, so we'll have to see what this adds up to be. But in terms of number of pardons, you can see Obama has a lot more. Now, here's the question. What kinds of people are getting pardoned by Trump? We know that folks like Stone, Manafort, I think his daughter's wife's father, I think one of the Kushner kind of family got pardoned. So let's be fair. Trump doesn't seem to be doing more pardons and commutations than others. It's quite low, at least as of now. I think the bigger issue is like, it's typical that pardons and commutations, they used to be for people who might have been like given too long of a sentence, or maybe they were extenuating circumstances. They're not usually for your family members. But that's that. Let's see. All right, I think those were my CNN Trump data. And then lastly, I did want to share some climate stuff, because I know Jerry's making a point here. Hey, if you're talking about COVID, it was China. Yes, it did start in China. Absolutely right. But you still have to mitigate it when it's in America, right? It's like if your neighbor starts a fire in your house, shouldn't you put out the fire? Or should you just say like, oh, it was that neighbor? I don't know. Seems like you should put out the fire. Okay. Let's talk about climate change. Here we have, see if I can show you a bigger version. This is interesting. Number of 1-inch downpours over time. And basically, it's been going up every year, on average, and set new records in 2019. So, number of warm spring days, similar. 18 more warm spring days than in 1970. I don't know if you think that means that climate change is real or not, but that's what the data is showing, at least on warm spring days. If you look at average spring temperatures, also up 3.4 degrees. Let's see. Sea level rise flood risk. All cities with NFL teams have warmed over the last 50 years. Occasional flooding by 2070. Warming in NFL cities. Spring is coming earlier. Less cold snaps. So basically, I don't know. I think it's pretty clear that the climate is changing. We've also had the 10 hottest years on record globally. Decades of warming is up. Hottest years on record globally. Yeah, shit. There's all the last few years. And if you see it's blue, it means that globally a country is experiencing colder weather on average. If it's a light blue, it's record cold is dark blue. Then this lavender is much cooler, and then cooler and near average. And as you can see, it's not a lot of blue here. Although, interesting left in the upper Midwest, there's a little patch of blue. So, yeah, I don't want to keep going, beat a dead horse here, but climate appears to be changing. We've been talking now for over an hour, so I just want to say thanks to everybody for tuning in. Any last comments in the chat you guys want to talk about? Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, by the way. Concerned Citizen says, just let the earth do its thing. Well, it's evolving. So I think that's the argument, that there's nothing we can do. There's a counter argument that the man's increase in carbon and use of fossil fuels has contributed to this, as well as cutting down trees. I guess my question for Concerned Citizen is that at what point does man need to do anything about this? Maybe it is evolving, but shouldn't we be prepared, and shouldn't we try and mitigate? What? Dude, Daniel, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I will tell you this, Daniel, all of the super chat money is going to go towards, I'm planning to do some marketing for this channel on other YouTube channels to try and grow our audience, because if I get more people to subscribe and watch the Nerd channel, I can also land bigger guest interviews. Like, so this year we had Scaramucci, we had Tim Ryan, we had Andrew Yang, we had a bunch of book authors, a bunch of congressional candidates. So we've done well, but I think your help, Daniel, and anybody who is a member will help us grow the channel even further. And so Godzilla also says thank you. All right. So with that, I'm just going to thank Daniel one more time. I appreciate that, man. Let me give you the gong of data. Woo. Calm ourselves. All right. Have a safe Christmas. If you're on the fence, please consider not traveling. Please consider staying with your pod. Okay, I said we were done. Let me just show you U.S. COVID stats. Okay. But this is a public service announcement here. Okay. So yesterday, 227,000 additional cases. If you look at deaths, 3,411 dead yesterday. New deaths. Okay. So people, don't do it, man. Like, just try, even if you're not worried about yourself, just do it for your neighbor. Do it for people that are at risk. Do it for like your friends who work in healthcare who are being overrun. All right. Let's see. Any other comments? How's your brother? He is in Singapore, and he's in the chat, actually. Peter's in the chat. Oh, that's funny. He says fake virus, ha ha. He's in Singapore, where clearly they are taking it very seriously. And he fled America because of the poor mitigation and control of the virus that was affecting his party lifestyle. The great irony for Peter, as you know, Peter, is that this was under your president, and I think you called Governor DeSantis in Florida the great Republican governor. So, he says he's coming back. Yeah, after Biden cleans it up, bro. Shoot. Oh my God. Anyway, Peter, don't get me started, man. Don't get me started. Okay, so with that, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Healthy New Year to you all. If you want, please check out ofthepeople.us. That's a nonprofit that I'm starting. It's like Kickstarter for Congress. We're going to launch our beta in January. And then if you are financially able And if you are one of the lucky people who have done well in the stock market and, oh, Vaughn, yay, thank you, Vaughn. Let me give you a gong. Dude, at this rate, we're going to grow the channel big time for 2021. Maybe right now we're at 18,000 subscribers. I would love to end 2021 with maybe 25,000 subscribers, or in a dream world, 50,000. But every dollar helps. This is going to help us invest more in content production, this beautiful green screen, the lighting, the hosting fees. But most of it's going to go to marketing of the channel. I might even think about offering honorariums to very famous people, like speaking fees to get them on. And then we can have a real long, nerdy conversation with them. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, nerds. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Healthy holidays to you all. And hope you enjoyed the charts. And lastly, don't forget, like and share and subscribe. All right. Peace out, nerds. Goodbye, nerds.